Juneteenth is a new national holiday, but it's not new. It goes back to celebrate when President Abraham Lincoln made a proclamation saying, "Everyone who is trapped and enslaved is now free. You are now free persons. There is no such thing any longer as slavery in America." That was to take effect on January 1st, 1863. And it took 2.5 years for that word to get implemented throughout the country. 2.5 years. And it's because there were people that were resistant to that word. They didn't want to hear it. It was going to affect their pocketbooks. It was going to affect their productivity. And so they resisted. But the word persevered. That proclamation made its way deeper and deeper and deeper into the country until on June 19th, 1865, the Union Army reached the southern tip of Texas. And on that day, that word was implemented everywhere. The interesting thing about that is that Abraham Lincoln had already died. His word went out in 1863, and he died in April of 1865. June 19th, that is, did not come around for another 2 months after his death. But it happened. When someone in authority speaks, they don't need to persuade every person to see things their way. Abraham Lincoln did not need to go to every plantation in every town in order to make his case. When you have authority, you speak and your word makes things happen. And so his proclamation was a little bit like that line we just heard from the gospel. Whoever has ears, hear this. We hear in the first reading the prophet Isaiah say, "The Lord your God says, don't you worry about me or my word. Don't you wonder if my word is going to take effect. It will. I'm God. The words that I utter will take effect." But the problem for us is that much like the Emancipation Proclamation, God seems to have a different relationship with time than we have. It seems that God allows things to take more time than we feel comfortable allowing them to take. Why is it that it takes so long for God's word to be able to be enacted in the world? The slaves had been waiting for freedom, and the speaking of the word made it possible, but it took time. And you may feel that that's what it's like in your life too. There may be promises God has made to you that you are waiting to see realized. When is this going to happen? And maybe one of the most frustrating versions of this is when we think we've made progress in ourselves. We think, wow, I'm really making progress. God's really getting somewhere with me now. And then we fall back into the same old pattern again. You know that feeling where you say to yourself, how many times am I going to have to learn this same lesson? When am I going to learn? We see ourselves falling into the same pattern again and again and again. And the gospel says, God is constantly throwing seeds on us by the handful. And some of them are landing in pounded down dust. Some of them are landing in weed beds and on rocks. But sometimes they land in a part of the land that is rich and well watered and gets just the right amount of sunlight and has fertilizer in it. So when we hear this gospel, we may be thinking, oh no, I'm bad soil. They're going to have to dig me up and throw me out. No, we're not one type of soil, you and me. We're a whole field. There's acres and acres and acres of land inside of us. And some of it is very rich and fertile. And some of it has gone to weeds and needs to be tilled ASAP. That is what this parable is telling us today. There's a part of me in my field that is beautiful soil, rich, dark soil that is all ready for planting. But there's other parts of you and me that are beaten down from something in life. Being in the wrong job or having too many worries or whatever it is. There's another part of me and you that is dealing with patterns that aren't working for us. Habits or addictions that are robbing us of who we could really be. We have unresolved childhood stuff that we haven't yet fully dealt with. And it's making it difficult for all of God's seeds to germinate because we're going back to the same childhood stuff that hasn't been resolved. Inside of you and of me, there are acres and acres and acres of land. And in some parts of that land, God's seeds are likely to get choked or crushed or dried out. And we need to focus on taking the plot of us that is good farmland and growing it, making it bigger, reclaiming some of what's been lost to weeds or to neglect or to all that other stuff. The thing we have to recognize is that there's a good chance that we have more farmland available now than we did a few years ago. If you're somebody who's practicing your faith, if you're here coming every week, that's tilling the soil. That's working it. And part of the patience that we need to have is to realize that we're probably going to run out of time before we actually get to plow the whole field. I'm not sure if anybody's ever plowed the whole field. Did Mother Teresa have her whole field plowed? I bet there were weed beds. I bet there were chunks of land in Mother Teresa that were not yet all resolved before she passed. But we can make progress. Our job is to keep farming that land. Our job is to keep tilling and to keep gaining ground. So there are things in our life that we have addressed, and we can see that there's progress being made. Maybe there's childhood stuff that we haven't yet addressed, but there's some that we have. And maybe there are wounds that we have that affect us, but maybe we can see that those are also the things that make us more compassionate with other people. So this week, it seems that we're being given a golden opportunity to recognize that there is land in us that we can identify as needing to be worked so it can be cultivated, and to maybe identify what that land is. I think an interesting way for us to figure out what that might be is to imagine a work party where our spouse is invited and is hanging out with our work friends who really like us, and we're not there. And they're bonding over little things they've noticed about us. Can you picture our best friends at work talking with our spouse, and maybe the conversation has gotten a little bit comfortable and they're saying things like, have you ever noticed when you, oh yeah, actually I have figured that out. Yeah, you don't go there with her. That's right. Can you imagine that conversation? Yeah, she does do that. It's said with love, but it's also said knowing. Yeah, that's a tough spot for her. Yeah. Oh, procrastination, I know. Whatever it is. Imagine that people who love us were talking about us behind our back with love, but with awareness. What would they identify? as the weedy part in us, as the part that's not available. It says no trespassing all around it, and they don't know why. It looks like good land. Why are we not allowed to go there? I learned recently that oak trees produce 10,000 acorns every year. 10,000. And you know, how many of them become oak trees? Maybe one, maybe two if it's a good year. Many years, not at all. Only when we get to heaven are all of our fields going to be plowed and fertile. But that doesn't mean that God can't work with the land that we've got. God's like, I'm not worried about not having enough land. You keep working on getting me more land, and I'll give you that seed. And let's just watch what it can do. Don't worry about the power of my words, says God. I'm God. It's going to achieve the goal I have for it. Don't you worry about that.